Oh shit. Here we go again.
Yeah, so there's this weird obsession with Trae Young, and it usually happens during the off season where people start hating on him for honestly no reason. It's just completely radio silent. Nobody talks about Trae Young for maybe the first month and a half, and then July comes around, and for some odd reason, there's just this massive storm of Trae Young hate that comes out of nowhere. So I had an extremely original idea. Let's go over all the criticism directed towards Trae Young and actually determine if any of that criticism holds any merit. Trae Young doesn't play winning basketball, which honestly couldn't be further from the truth. The main argument that people like to use against Trae Young is his high usage rate and how he averages a lot of turnovers, which are completely fair, especially when you are a point guard. Yeah, but it's definitely been overblown. When a player's usage rate is high, it isn't always necessarily because they demand everything go through them and them only. There are definitely scenarios of players having a good enough roster but choosing not to change or add aspects to their game to further their team's success, but that isn't the case with Trae Young. Trae Young has played in the NBA for 5 seasons now, and his usage rate has gone down in Atlanta's most successful seasons during that period. 2021 Trae Young was peak Trae Young, and I think that was due to how Atlanta constructed its roster. Trae at the 1, Bogey at the 2, Kevin Huerter or DeAndre Hunter when he came back from injury at the 3, John Collins at the 4, and Clint Capella at the 5. Do you want to know why this team was so good? Because it was extremely flexible.
What do you mean by that?
Pause. Which has been a reoccurring issue in lineups that feature Trae Young, teams that can't work with each other, which is a huge problem with this year's Atlanta Hawks, which we'll definitely get to. Bogey at the 2, who is maybe the best type of guard that can play alongside a player like Trae Young. A guy who's a pretty good shooter and is active off the ball, a guy who can take over playmaking duties without averaging a lot of turnovers, and who is extremely active on both ends of the floor. Kevin Huerter, also a very good three-point shooter who is extremely active off the ball and at times even a third playmaker as well, and even a decent on-ball defender. Now these two are not all-stars and they're not guys who average even 20 points a game, but they work best with the players that Atlanta have. You see the two guys down there in the paint? Yeah, they both can't shoot. Most teams are definitely okay with giving John Collins a lot of jump shots or allowing him to have the ball more because, well, he isn't a very good playmaker either. So with this knowledge, you would think Atlanta would actually acquire players that play like this, but, you know, at a higher clip and at a higher ceiling. So then they proceed to acquire DeJounte Murray. Just one problem though, he can't shoot. Well, can't shoot is an overstatement, but he's definitely not a very efficient shooter. He does have his nights where he, you know, actually has a hot game and he has a great shooting night, which leads us into our next point. Trae Young can't move off the ball. I don't think Trae Young is opposed to giving up more touches or even moving off the ball if it guarantees his team success. Atlanta's issues on offense isn't Trae Young moving off the ball, it's these two. Here's the thing, right? One of these two needed to go so the other could stay. Having 3 non-shooters on the floor and asking Trae Young, who mind you is 6'1" and also a better playmaker, to move off the ball is kind of dumb. I don't care what anybody says, there isn't an off-ball screen in human history that could be set to generate a 6-foot guard an open look on this offense.
It's not that hard. It's not that difficult, mate. You know what I mean? It's not it's not anything too serious. It's just a bit of dry food here and there, and yeah, get bored every now and then.
Do I like the backcourt of DeJounte Murray and Trae Young? No, because Trae Young moving off the ball is extremely inefficient. Trae never needed a secondary ball handler, especially one that couldn't consistently shoot or work without the ball. Could it still work? I mean, I guess. If Atlanta can acquire a power forward that could shoot, set good screens, self-create, but that would also cost way too much.
This is disrespectful. I don't care, you know, like.
Okay, I will now get to the negatives of Trae Young and his game, since he isn't perfect. Turnovers. Trae Young and his turnovers. You know what's sad? Most of the time, his turnovers aren't on plays that couldn't have worked. You see the vision and the potential outcome of passes or plays that he's about to make, but they're just rushed, which is my main issue with Trae Young. He plays too nonchalantly. Consequences to outcomes are the last thing going through his mind, which is a problem. After a turnover, it doesn't seem like he's too bothered by it, which is understandable in the moment, but it doesn't seem like he's making an effort to lower his turnovers, which is kind of annoying. If he cleans that part of of his game up, oh my god, would it make such a drastic difference. Unnecessary shooting. Okay, this is also pretty annoying. So Atlanta would build a decent cushion, right? Nothing crazy, maybe like 5 or 6 points, and then he would throw up a half-court shot for no reason. And it's never at the end of a shot clock or when a play breaks down. It's always or usually in the beginning of a play, which is extremely wasteful, especially from a point guard. You know, the guy who starts the plays and manages the clock and the tempo of the game. This is only magnified to a higher extent when they play a good team. A lot of those shots are probably shots he wish he could take back at the end of games, since they usually bite his team in the back. Someone needs to tell him, yeah, it's cool once in a while, or at the end of a shot clock when a play breaks down, not when you have that much time on the clock, especially when you're playing a good team. His defense, dog, all you gotta do is give a bit more effort. That's really it. Nobody expects you to be a good defender, but giving effort and staying active and engaged is the bare minimum. That's not something that's a very big ask. The crazy thing about criticism that Trae Young receives is how easily avoidable it is. It isn't lack of ability or talent that people are questioning. It's just whether or not he wants to smoothen out parts of his game, which is kind of crazy to think about because the way people talk about him is pretty crazy in my opinion. I mean, I'd have Trae Young over a lot of players in the NBA.